The moment the police officers stepped through the glass doors of the corporate headquarters, every conversation in the lobby came to a sudden stop. Employees turned their heads. Security guards stood straighter. Visitors looked around in confusion. At the center of it all stood a tired-looking single father wearing faded jeans, worn-out boots, and a jacket that had clearly seen better days. His hands were rough from years of hard work, and beside him stood his 8-year-old daughter clutching a small backpack. To everyone watching, he looked completely out of place. And that was exactly why the CEO had called the police. She believed he was a fraud. What nobody in that building knew was that within the next hour, the truth would leave an entire company speechless. Because the man they were treating like an intruder actually owned 50% of the company. Before we begin, if you believe kindness matters more than appearances and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. The winter wind whipped through downtown Chicago as Michael Carter held his daughter's hand while staring up at the towering skyscraper before them. His daughter Emma looked up with wide eyes. For years she had heard stories about this place. Stories about her grandfather. Stories about dreams. Stories about promises. Now she was finally seeing it with her own eyes. Michael took a deep breath. The building carried the company name his father had helped create decades earlier. His father, Robert Carter, had started the business with his best friend when they were young men with nothing but determination and ambition. Together they built a small manufacturing company into a multi-million-dollar corporation. But life had a cruel way of changing plans. When Michael was 22, he lost his mother. A few years later, he lost his father. And after that, everything seemed to fall apart. The company leadership changed. New executives arrived. Old relationships disappeared. Michael never cared much about corporate life anyway. He chose a simpler path. He became a mechanic. He married the woman he loved. He built a modest but happy life. Then tragedy struck again. His wife passed away unexpectedly after a sudden illness, leaving Michael alone to raise their young daughter. Since then, every day had been a struggle. Bills piled up. Work hours grew longer. Sleep became shorter. But no matter how difficult life became, he never stopped showing up for Emma. She was his reason to keep moving forward. A month earlier, while sorting through old boxes in his late father's storage unit, Michael discovered something extraordinary. Inside a dusty metal safe were documents, contracts, and ownership records. As he carefully examined them, he realized something shocking. His father had never sold his share of the company. The 50% ownership stake had been legally transferred to Michael after Robert's death. Somehow the documents had been forgotten, buried among years of legal confusion and neglected paperwork. The discovery seemed impossible. At first Michael thought there had to be a mistake. But after speaking with attorneys and reviewing records, the truth became undeniable. Half of the company belonged to him. The lawyers advised him to visit headquarters immediately. So that was exactly what he was doing. But he had no idea what awaited him inside. The lobby looked like another world. Polished marble floors reflected the bright lights overhead. Employees walked confidently through security checkpoints carrying expensive laptops and designer briefcases. Michael suddenly felt self-conscious. His clothes smelled faintly of motor oil from the repair shop. His jacket sleeve had a small tear. His boots were scratched and worn. Emma squeezed his hand. Her smile gave him courage. Together they approached the reception desk. The receptionist glanced up briefly before returning her attention to the computer screen. Michael politely explained that he needed to meet with company leadership regarding ownership documents. The receptionist's expression changed almost immediately. She looked him up and down. Then she looked at Emma. Then back at him. A faint smile appeared on her face. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile people give when they think someone is ridiculous. Within minutes, word began spreading through the lobby. Several employees exchanged amused looks. Others whispered among themselves. Nobody took him seriously. Eventually the receptionist contacted senior management. That message reached CEO Victoria Reynolds. Victoria was known throughout the industry as brilliant, disciplined, and fiercely protective of the company. She had spent years climbing to the top. Under her leadership, profits had increased dramatically. But success had also made her cautious. Suspicious. Quick to judge. When she heard that a mechanic claiming ownership of half the company was waiting downstairs with a child, she immediately assumed it was some kind of scam. She ordered security to monitor him. Then she came down herself. The moment she saw Michael, her assumptions hardened. She saw his clothes. His tired face. His inexpensive watch. His daughter. Nothing about him matched the image she had of a major shareholder. Victoria barely listened as Michael attempted to explain. In her mind, she had already decided. This man was wasting everyone's time. And then she made a decision she would soon regret. She called the police. The atmosphere changed instantly. Employees gathered discreetly around the lobby. Some recorded with their phones. Others watched eagerly. Michael stood frozen. Emma moved closer to him. He could see fear growing in her eyes. That hurt more than the humiliation. He wasn't embarrassed for himself. He was heartbroken for his daughter. She had already lost her mother. She had already seen too much pain. Now she was watching strangers treat her father like a criminal. When the officers arrived, Michael remained calm. He explained everything respectfully. He showed them the folder containing ownership records. One officer began reviewing the documents carefully. His expression gradually shifted. Then he asked for identification. Michael handed it over. The officer compared the information. Checked the records again. Then checked them a third time. Silence spread across the lobby. The officer finally looked toward Victoria. His voice was professional but firm. The documents appeared authentic. Very authentic. In fact, they suggested Michael Carter was exactly who he claimed to be. A legal owner. Not a trespasser. Not a fraud. An owner. Victoria felt a knot form in her stomach. But things were about to become even more shocking. The company's legal department was summoned. Senior attorneys rushed downstairs. They reviewed the documents. Examined signatures. Verified historical filings. Cross-checked archived records. The process took nearly an hour. An hour during which nobody in the building seemed to breathe. Then the lead attorney delivered the conclusion. The ownership records were legitimate. The transfer was valid. And Michael Carter possessed a 50% stake in the corporation. The lobby became completely silent. People stared in disbelief. The same employees who had mocked him moments earlier now looked away in embarrassment. The security guard stood speechless. The receptionist's face turned pale. Victoria felt the weight of her mistake crashing down upon her. The man she had publicly humiliated was not merely an investor. He was effectively one of the most powerful individuals in the company. But Michael's response surprised everyone. He wasn't angry. He wasn't demanding revenge. He wasn't celebrating. Instead, he knelt beside Emma and reassured her that everything was okay. That simple act revealed more about his character than any business title ever could. Over the following weeks, Michael became increasingly involved in company affairs. Many executives expected dramatic changes. They anticipated firings. Power struggles. Retaliation. None of it happened. What Michael discovered during his review of operations troubled him deeply. The company was financially successful. But employee morale was collapsing. Workers felt invisible. Departments were overwhelmed. Many long-term staff members felt disconnected from leadership. Michael understood something many executives had forgotten. A company is not built by numbers. It is built by people. He began visiting departments personally. He listened instead of lecturing. He asked questions instead of giving orders. He spent time with janitors, warehouse workers, receptionists, technicians, and administrative staff. For the first time in years, employees felt heard. Gradually the culture began changing. People became more motivated. Communication improved. Trust returned. Even Victoria noticed the difference. At first she struggled with guilt. Every time she saw Michael, she remembered that terrible day in the lobby. The assumptions. The judgment. The police. Eventually she gathered the courage to apologize publicly. Not because she was forced to. Because it was the right thing to do. Standing before employees, she admitted her mistake. She acknowledged that she had judged someone based entirely on appearance. She confessed that she had allowed assumptions to replace facts. Many leaders would never have done that. The room listened quietly. Then Michael did something nobody expected. He accepted her apology without hesitation. Because he understood something important. Holding on to bitterness only creates more pain. Forgiveness creates healing. That moment became a turning point for the entire company. Months later, profits continued growing. Employee satisfaction reached record highs. Turnover dropped significantly. The workplace felt transformed. But the greatest victory wasn't financial. It was human. One afternoon, Michael walked through the lobby with Emma. The same lobby where everything had changed. Employees greeted them warmly. Security guards smiled. The receptionist who had once doubted him now welcomed every visitor with kindness and respect. Emma looked around and smiled. She no longer remembered the fear she had felt that day. Instead, she saw a place filled with people who cared about one another. Michael looked at the company logo displayed high above the entrance. He thought about his father. The man who had helped build this business from nothing. He thought about his wife. The woman who had always believed in him. And he thought about Emma. The little girl who had given him strength during the hardest years of his life. In that moment, he realized something profound. True wealth was never ownership percentages. It was never corporate titles. It was never power. True wealth was character. It was integrity. It was kindness when kindness was difficult. It was choosing compassion when judgment would have been easier. And perhaps that was the lesson everyone in that building needed most. Before we reach the end, I have one special request for you. Comment below with the words, kindness over judgment, if you believe people should be valued for their character, not their appearance. As Michael and Emma stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, the future felt brighter than it had in years. Life had tested them relentlessly. Loss had nearly broken them. Hardship had followed them for far too long. But through it all, they never lost their humanity. And in the end, that humanity changed not only their lives but an entire company. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that remind the world that kindness, humility, and second chances still matter. Because sometimes the person the world overlooks is the very person capable of changing everything. And sometimes the greatest mistake we can make is judging a person's worth before learning their story. The next time you meet someone who seems ordinary, remember Michael Carter. Because behind worn clothes may stand extraordinary courage. Behind quiet struggles may exist remarkable strength. And behind the person everyone doubts may be a story powerful enough to change lives forever.